Welcome to The Joyful Alchemist, the podcast where transformation meets inspiration. My name is Lynn Falconer, your guide on this journey of turning life's ordinary moments into extraordinary magic. Here we dive into personal growth, spiritual insights, and practical tools to help you unlock joy, purpose, and abundance. Whether you're seeking clarity, courage, or connection, this is your space to explore, evolve, and embrace the alchemy of joyful living. Let's ignite transformation, one powerful conversation at a time. The Book of Numbers, chapters 1 through 30. The Count of the Capable. In the wilderness of Sinai, God spoke to Moses within the sacred tent. It was the beginning of the 2nd month in the 2nd year since the Israelites left Egypt. God instructed Moses to count every man 20 years and older who could serve in Israel's army. Aaron helped him, and each tribe had a designated leader to assist. Tribe by tribe they came forward: Reuben, Simeon, Gad, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Ephraim, Manasseh, Benjamin, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. The count was meticulous, resulting in 603,550 men able to go to war. The Levites, however, were excluded from the census. God had chosen them for a different purpose: to care for the tabernacle and all its sacred items. They would encamp around it, guarding it as the people's spiritual shield. With the people counted and the camp organized, the nation was being shaped into a disciplined force with divine order. Banners in the wilderness. The Lord commanded that the Israelites arrange their camp by divisions, each under their family banner, encircling the tabernacle at a respectful distance. On the east side camped Judah with Issachar and Zebulun. To the south, Reuben was joined by Simeon and Gad. On the west side were Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin. To the north, Dan, Asher, and Naphtali. They formed the final division. At the heart of the camp, the Levites surrounded the tabernacle, guarding it night and day. Their placement was not only practical, but sacred, ensuring no outsider would approach without reverence. When the time came to move, the tribes would march in a specific order. God was teaching them discipline, unity, and devotion through every detail, even in how they slept and traveled. The chosen ones. God singled out the tribe of the Levi to serve him in the tabernacle. Aaron's sons were appointed as priests: Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. But tragedy had already touched them. Nadab and Abihu died when they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord. The Levites were assigned in 3 families: Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The Gershonites would care for the curtains and coverings. The Kohathites were entrusted with the holiest objects: the ark, the table, the lampstand, and altars. The Merarites bore the structure, the frames, bases, and pillars. God declared that the Levites would replace the firstborn of every Israelite household. In doing so, he took them as his own. Their number was 22,000, closely matching the firstborn males among the tribes. Any surplus was redeemed with silver, 5 shekels per head. Holiness had a price, and every detail was fulfilled as God commanded Moses. Sacred responsibilities. Only Levites aged 30 to 50 were eligible for the most sacred tasks, and each clan had a defined role. The Kohathites handled the most precious items, though they could not touch or see them directly. After the priests covered them with special cloths, the Kohathites carried them on their shoulders. The Gershonites carried the curtains, ropes, and other coverings. The Merarites managed the heavy framework and pegs of the tabernacle. Each clan was under the oversight of Aaron's sons and reported to Ithamar or Eleazar. Each duty was recorded. Each man counted. Holiness demanded order, and service demanded obedience. Every movement of the tabernacle would be led by those who served in silent, sacred labor. Purity in the camp. God commanded that the Israelites purify the camp from those with infectious diseases, bodily discharges, or who had touched the dead. These individuals were temporarily sent outside the camp, not as punishment, but to preserve the sanctity of God's dwelling place. Next came laws of restitution. Anyone who wronged another had to confess, repay the debt, and add a fifth to it. If no family was left to claim the payment, it went to the Lord via the priest. A striking law followed. If a man suspected his wife of unfaithfulness with no witnesses, he brought her to the priest. There a solemn ceremony unfolded. Holy water mixed with dust, curses pronounced, and the woman's fate placed in God's hands. If guilty, her body would bear the curse. If innocent, she would be cleared and remain fertile. It was a system built on trust, not just between husband and wife, but between the people and their God. A vow and a blessing. Some Israelites desired a deeper walk with God. To those he gave the Nazirite vow, a voluntary offering of self. No wine, no grapes, and no razor could touch their head. They avoided death in any form, even the mourning of close relatives. If defiled unexpectedly, the vow was reset after a purification process. When completed, the Nazirite presented offerings, burnt, sin, peace, and grain, and shaved their head, burning the hair in the fire of the peace offering. Their vow concluded with a public act of worship. Finally, God gave Moses a blessing for the priests to speak over the people. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May he lift his countenance and grant you peace. With those words, the name of the Lord rested upon Israel, and God himself promised to bless them. Dedication of the altar. The day Moses finished setting up the tabernacle, he anointed and consecrated it and all its furnishings. The leaders of the 12 tribes, heads of the ancestral houses, brought offerings for the altar's dedication, gifts of silver, gold, incense, livestock, and grain. Their devotion was evident in their generosity. 6 carts and 12 oxen were given, 2 leaders per cart, 1 ox per leader. The Gershonites received 2 carts and 4 oxen. The Merarites, responsible for heavier loads, received 4 carts and 8 oxen. The Kohathites received none, for their sacred burdens were carried on their shoulders. For 12 days, 1 leader each brought identical offerings, a silver plate and bowl filled with flour and oil, a golden dish of incense, a young bull, ram, and lamb for burnt offerings, a goat for a sin offering, and an array of animals for peace offerings. It was not the value of the gift, but the unity and devotion behind them that made this act of worship complete. When all was finished, Moses entered the tabernacle. There, from between the cherubim atop the Ark of the Covenant, he heard the voice of the Lord speaking to him. The light and the Levites. The Lord instructed Moses to tell Aaron to set up the lamps in the tabernacle, so they cast light forward. Aaron obeyed, and the holy lampstand glowed, a symbol of divine presence and direction. Next, God commanded the purification and dedication of the Levites. They were washed, shaved, and consecrated with offerings. In a public ceremony, the Israelites laid hands on them, and the Levites in turn lay hands on the sacrifices, offering themselves wholly to God's service. From then on, the Levites took the place of the firstborn sons of Israel. God declared them his own. They served under Aaron and his sons, maintaining the sanctuary. Only those between 25 and 50 were eligible for this sacred duty. Beyond that age, they retired from the labor but continued to assist. It was an orderly and reverent transition, marking a new era of worship and holy service for Israel's future. The second Passover and the cloud. 1 year after the exodus from Egypt, God told Moses to have the people celebrate the Passover. On the 14th day of the first month at twilight, they remembered their deliverance. But some men were unclean due to contact with a dead body and could not participate. They came to Moses asking, "Why should we be excluded from the Lord's offering?" Moses inquired of the Lord, who responded with grace. Such individuals could observe Passover a month later. This provision extended to those on distant journeys, but anyone clean who chose not to observe it would be cut off. From that time on, the people watched the cloud above the tabernacle. When it lifted, they set out. When it settled, they stayed, whether for a day, a week, for a year. The cloud's movement dictated their own. It was the visible presence of God, and they followed without question. Trumpets and departure. God instructed Moses to make 2 silver trumpets. These would summon the community, signal their movement, and alert them in times of war or celebration. When both sounded, the whole assembly gathered. A single trumpet called only the leaders. On the 20th day of the 2nd month, the cloud lifted from above the tabernacle. For the first time since Sinai, the Israelites prepared to march. The eastern division moved out first, followed by the others in their proper order, with the ark leading the way. Before departing, Moses invited Hobab, his Midianite brother-in-law, to join them. Hobab hesitated, wanting to return home, but Moses urged him, "You know the wilderness. Be our guide. Come with us and share in all the good the Lord gives us." And so the great journey resumed. As they marched, Moses prayed, "Rise up, O Lord, let your enemies be scattered, and those who hate you flee before you." And when they rested, he declared, "Return, O Lord, to the countless thousands of Israel." Craving in the wilderness. The people of Israel began to complain about their hardships, and the Lord's anger was kindled. Fire from the Lord broke out among them and consumed the outskirts of the camp. Terrified, the people cried to Moses, who prayed, and the fire died down. Yet the complaining continued. The Israelites grew tired of manna and longed for the meat and variety they had in Egypt. Moses, overwhelmed by their demands, cried out to God, despairing of the burden. God responded by commanding Moses to appoint 70 elders to share the leadership burden. Then the Lord promised meat, so much that it would become loathsome to them. Quail descended in abundance, and the people greedily gathered them. But while the meat was still in their mouths, a plague struck. That place was called Kibroth Hattaavah, the graves of craving. There many were buried because they lusted for more than God had given. Miriam's jealousy. Miriam and Aaron began to speak against Moses because of his Cushite wife. Beneath their words were jealousy over Moses' unique relationship with God. "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses?" they asked. God heard them and summoned the 3 siblings to the tent of meeting. There, in a pillar of cloud, the Lord defended Moses. "With other prophets I speak in dreams, but with Moses I speak face to face." Then the cloud lifted, and Miriam's skin turned white with leprosy. Aaron pleaded with Moses, who in turn pleaded with God. The Lord relented, but demanded Miriam remained outside the camp for 7 days. The people waited for her return. When she was healed and brought back, they moved forward, reminded of the cost of envy and the weight of leadership. Spies in the Promised Land. God instructed Moses to send 1 leader from each tribe to scout the land of Canaan. For 40 days, the 12 spies explored the land. They returned carrying a single cluster of grapes, so large it had to be carried between 2 men. They reported, "It is a land flowing with milk and honey." But 10 of the 12 warned of giants and fortified cities. "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes," they said. Only Caleb urged the people to take the land. "We can certainly do it," he said with faith, but fear spread like wildfire, and the people began to despair. The land, though beautiful and bountiful, now seemed out of reach, not because of its strength, but because of the weakness in the hearts of its beholders. Rebellion and judgment. That night the people wept aloud. They grumbled against Moses and Aaron, wishing to return to Egypt. They even proposed choosing a new leader to take them back. Moses and Aaron fell face down in anguish, while Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes, pleading with the people to trust God, but the community talked of stoning them. Then the glory of the Lord appeared. God declared his intent to destroy the people, but Moses interceded, reminding him of his mercy and reputation among the nations. God pardoned, but with consequence. None of the men who rejected him would enter the Promised Land, except Caleb and Joshua. The rest would wander the wilderness for 40 years, 1 year for each day of the spies' journey. A group tried to enter the land by force the next day, but they were routed by the Amalekites and Canaanites. Disobedience had already sealed their fate. Laws and reminders. Despite their failure, God gave new instructions to Moses for life in the Promised Land. These included offerings for unintentional sins and a provision that both native-born and foreigners must follow the same law. If a community sinned unintentionally, they could make atonement, but deliberate sin showed contempt of the Lord and would be met with severe consequences. As a vivid example, a man caught gathering wood on the Sabbath was brought before Moses. The Lord ordered that he be stoned to death outside the camp. To help prevent such disobedience, God commanded the people to wear tassels on the corners of their garments. Each tassel would have a blue cord, a reminder to obey God's commands and stay holy before Him. The rebellion of Korah. Korah, from the tribe of Levi, along with Dathan, Abiram, and 250 leaders, rose up against Moses and Aaron. They challenged their authority, saying, "All the people are holy. Why do you exalt yourselves above the Lord's assembly?" Moses fell face down and proposed a test. The next day, Korah and his followers were to bring censers with incense before the Lord. God would choose who was holy. The Lord's anger burned. Moses warned the people to step away from the tents of the rebels. Suddenly the earth opened and swallowed Korah, Dathan, Abiram, their families, and all their possessions. Fire consumed the 250 men offering incense. The next day the people grumbled again, blaming Moses and Aaron for the deaths. A plague broke out. Aaron ran into the crowd with incense to make atonement, standing between the living and the dead. The plague stopped, but 14,700 had perished. Aaron's staff buds. To end the complaints, God told Moses to collect a staff from the leader of each tribe, 12 in total. Aaron's name was inscribed on Levi's staff. The staffs were placed before the ark overnight. The next day, Aaron's staff had budded, blossomed, and produced almonds. It was a divine sign. God confirmed Aaron's role as priest, silencing the people's murmuring. The staff was placed before the ark as a lasting reminder to the Israelites not to rebel again, lest they die. The people trembled, aware of the holiness now dwelling among them. Duties and provisions for priests and Levites. God gave Aaron and his sons full responsibility for the sanctuary and priesthood. The Levites were assigned to assist them, but not to approach the holy furnishings or altar. In return for their sacred service, the priests received the most holy offerings, including grain, sin, and guilt offerings. The first fruits and redemption money for the firstborn also belonged to them. Levites received tithes from the people, and they in turn gave a tenth to the priests. These provisions were God's covenant gift to ensure the sanctuary was honored and served with reverence. The water of purification. God instructed Moses and Aaron to take a perfect red heifer without blemish and slaughter it outside the camp. Eleazar, the priest, was to oversee the ritual. The heifer's blood was sprinkled toward the tabernacle, then its body burned with cedar wood, hyssop, and scarlet yarn. The ashes were gathered and mixed with water for purification. This water was used to cleanse those who had touched a dead body. Without it, they remained unclean and defiled the sanctuary. Anyone who refused this purification was cut off from Israel. Through this sacred ritual, God provided a way for life to be restored from the touch of death. Water from the rock and the end of an era. In the wilderness of Zin, the people again grumbled. There was no water. They quarreled with Moses and Aaron. God told Moses to speak to a rock before the assembly. Instead, Moses struck it twice with his staff. Water gushed out, but the Lord was displeased. Because Moses and Aaron did not trust God enough to honor him before the people, they were told they would not enter the promised land. Soon after, they came to Mount Hor, where Aaron was stripped of his garments and transferred his priesthood to his son Eleazar. Aaron died there, and the people mourned 30 days. A chapter closed with sorrow, as a faithful servant passed, and a new generation stood at the edge of promise. Victory, venom, and vision. As Israel journeyed, the Canaanite king of Arad attacked and took captives. Israel vowed to the Lord, if granted victory, they would destroy the cities. God heard them, and they triumphed, naming the place Hormah. But as they traveled around Edom, the people grew impatient and complained once more about the manna and the lack of water. In response, God sent fiery serpents among them. Many died from the bites. The people repented and begged Moses to intercede. God told Moses to make a bronze serpent and lift it on a pole. Anyone who looked at it after being bitten would live. It was a symbol of both judgment and mercy. Israel continued to journey, defeating Sihon, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of the Bashan, claiming new territory on the way to the Promised Land. The donkey speaks. As Israel camped in the plains of Moab, Balak, king of Moab, was terrified. He sent for Balaam, a diviner, to curse Israel. Though God warned Balaam not to go, Balaam eventually set out, his heart swayed by the promise of reward. Along the way, the angel of the Lord blocked Balaam's path. Though Balaam couldn't see it, his donkey did, and stopped 3 times. Frustrated, Balaam beat the donkey until the Lord opened its mouth. "Why have you beaten me?" it asked. Then Balaam's eyes were opened. He saw the angel and fell face down. God permitted Balaam to continue, but only to speak his words. Balak met Balaam with hope, but Balaam issued a stern warning. "I can speak only what God gives me to say." Blessings instead of curses. Balak took Balaam to high places to curse Israel, but each time Balaam opened his mouth, blessings poured out instead. He declared, "How can I curse whom God has not cursed? Behold, a people dwelling alone, not reckoning itself among the nations." Balak, frustrated, moved him to another location. Again, Balaam blessed Israel, proclaiming, "God is not a man that he should lie. He has blessed, and I cannot reverse it." Though Balak sought magic, God's sovereign will prevailed. Balaam's tongue could only speak what heaven declared. A vision of the future. Realizing God's will could not be swayed, Balaam looked upon Israel from the heights, and the Spirit of God came upon him. He prophesied of Israel's flourishing. "How lovely are your tents, O Jacob!" He saw visions of Israel's triumph and peace. Then came a future vision. "A star shall come out of Jacob, a scepter shall rise out of Israel." It was a foretelling of a royal deliverer, a king to conquer Moab and rule with justice. Balak's anger boiled. Balaam reminded him, "Did I not say I could only speak what the Lord commands?" And with that the two went their separate ways. Sin at Peor. As Israel dwelt in Shittim, the people began to commit harlotry with Moabite women. These women invited them to sacrificial feasts to Baal of Peor, and Israel bowed to the foreign god. God's anger blazed. A plague broke out. Moses commanded the leaders to execute the guilty. Amid this judgment, an Israelite man brazenly brought a Midianite woman into his tent. Phinehas, grandson of Aaron, seized a spear and drove it through both of them. His zeal stopped the plague, and 24,000 had died. God honored Phinehas with a covenant of peace and a lasting priesthood. The chapter ended with a call for continued vigilance against idolatry and intermarriage with the Midianites. A new generation counted. After the plague, God instructed Moses and Eleazar to take a new census of the Israelite men, 20 years and older, who were able to fight. This was a new generation, the children of those who had left Egypt. Tribe by tribe, they were counted. The total number came to 601,730, slightly less than the original count, but purified through the wilderness. God reminded them that the land would be divided according to the number in each tribe, and by lot. The Levites were counted separately, numbering 23,000 males a month old and older. None of the previous generation remained, except for Caleb and Joshua, the faithful spies who trusted God's promise. Daughters of Zelophehad and a new leader. 5 courageous sisters, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah, stood before Moses to plead their case. Their father, Zelophehad, had died without sons. They asked to inherit his land so his name would not vanish. God agreed, affirming their right and establishing a law. If a man died without sons, his inheritance would pass to his daughters, and beyond that, to relatives in a defined order. Then God told Moses it was time. He would not enter the promised land because of the incident with Meribah. From Mount Abarim he would see the land but not walk in it. Moses asked for a successor. God chose Joshua, a man filled with the Spirit. Moses laid his hands on him publicly, transferring authority before Eleazar, the priest, and the entire congregation. Daily and festival offerings. God outlined the rhythm of worship and sacrifice. Each day 2 lambs were to be offered, one in the morning and one in the evening, along with grain and drink offerings. Every Sabbath an extra set of offerings was added. Each month began with a special burnt offering. God then described the offerings for major festivals: Passover, the Feast of Weeks, the Feast of Trumpets, the Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. Each required precise sacrifices offered in addition to regular ones. These instructions reminded the people to honor God consistently and joyfully in the cycles of time and harvest. More holy festivals. God continued listing the sacrifices required during the 7th month, the most sacred period in Israel's calendar. The Feast of Trumpets marked the first day with blasts and burnt offerings. On the 10th day, the Day of Atonement brought solemn reflection, fasting, and more sacrifices. The 15th day began the week-long Feast of Tabernacles. Each day brought a specific number of bulls, rams, lambs, and grain offerings. Though the rituals were complex, they shaped Israel's identity, constantly reminding them of their dependence on divine mercy and blessing. The power of a promise. Moses conveyed God's laws about vows. A man who made a vow to the Lord must keep it fully. A woman's vow could be upheld or nullified based on her father or husband's promise. If a father or husband remained silent, the vow stood. If they intervened on the day they heard it, the vow was cancelled. These laws emphasized integrity and the spiritual weight of one's words. Promises to God were not to be made lightly, and neither were they to be broken without cause. Thank you for joining me on this episode of The Joyful Alchemist, where transformation and joy collide. If today's episode inspired you, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a moment of magic. Keep shining, keep growing, and remember, you have the power to turn the ordinary into the extraordinary. Until next time, stay joyful and keep alchemizing your dreams into reality.